All right, we're going to get started now. Hope everybody is doing well. And we're going to start out tonight centering on the pineal gland. And we're going to take a little journey that leads us to the central topic of the divine feminine. And talking about the pineal gland, although it seems like it's separate from the subject of the divine feminine, it is not. Any topic of spirituality, of esoteric knowledge, of the cosmos, of whatever reality it is that we want to talk about, is going to lead us back to the divine feminine ultimately. So we want to start here. And as it relates to the third eye or the pineal gland, Matthew 6:22, we'll start here, makes a statement that says, the light of the body is the eye. The light of the body is the eye. And we can say, since the body is the temple, that the light of the temple is the eye. Because symbolically, we're going to come across that subject as well. The light of the body or the temple is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, this word single in the Greek speaks of something that is whole, healthy, or functional. Something that is whole, healthy, or functional. Everybody is familiar that in our fall, that the pineal gland became calcified and thus dysfunctional. The light of the body of the temple is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, if thine eye be single, whole, healthy, or functional, thy whole body shall be full of light. And we're going to focus on the fully functioning pineal. We're going to assume that the pineal is fully functional, whole, single, healthy. And we're going to begin our journey here. The above hieroglyphic sign is usually said to be the eye of Horus. The eye of Horus. But as we'll explain as we go through the class, the primal and central divine feminine has been subjugated, has been hidden in history, has been obscured and put aside. And what used to be feminine representations were at a certain time and then gradually through history replaced by male symbols or male interpretations or male personifications. The eye of Horus looks similar to the pineal gland. Though it has different meanings, the pineal gland on the right looks strikingly similar to what? A womb. A womb. So this goes to substantiate and to confirm that the statement I'm going to make, that this is not the eye of Horus, but the eye of Isis, because in the beginning, in ancient times, the symbol was rendered to look both like to look like an eye, but at the same time represent the womb. Okay, the womb. So then the eye is a source of light, as well as the yoni, or the womb, or the female vagina. All right, very important. Very important. The pineal gland, DMT, melanin, and mythological beings. The symbol of the all-seeing eye has always been part of Earth's creation mythologies and mysteries. In ancient Egypt, it was symbolized as the eye of Horus. And again, we're going to say that that's the eye of Isis. The symbol was passed down through the ancient mystery teachings and can be found on the American dollar bill. So when you see the symbol, and we took a look at this a little bit earlier, but I'll scroll back to it. When you take a look at the symbol that represents the dollar bill, bear with me, we'll get to it. It is an S with two bars in the middle. And that is the compressed name of Isis, ISIS. Let me see if I can get to it. Oh, here we go. On the dollar bill, and we see what they say is the eye of Horus or the eye of Ra. The symbol tells you it's ISIS, Isis. All right? So again, we want to focus on the divine feminine. Again, the symbol was passed down. That is the eye of Isis, not the eye of Horus, was passed down through the ancient mystery teachings. Can be found on the dollar bill. The question, why the symbol of the eye? The eye is the observer of reality, or the illusion of reality. It's the observer of the organic reality, as well as the observer of the simulated reality, the illusion. It is not only the observer of these things, it is the creator of both. Very important that we understand this. Not only the observer, but the creator of both the organic reality as well as the illusory simulated reality of the matrix. This gland is activated by light, and it controls the various biorhythms of the body. Very important that we understand this. It works in harmony with the hypothalamus gland, which directs the body's thirst, hunger. This is what we're going to concentrate on. Sexual desire, and the biological clock that determines the aging process. So when you hear the term biological clock, automatically we think of the biological clock in the female in terms of her biological period of time that she can what? Reproduce physically. Reproduce physically. DMT is structurally similar to melatonin. The biochemical precursor to both molecules is serotonin, a key neurotransmitter whose pathways are involved in mood and targeted in the treatment of psychiatric disorders. DMT, so in a large part, this serotonin rather, that is similar to melanin or melatonin, directs or affects or determines character to a certain extent. DMT also structurally resembles other psychedelic drugs such as LSD, psilocybin, and is the active agent in ayahuasca brew Amazon shamans use to provoke out-of-body experiences. Trace amounts of DMT have been found in humans, particularly in the lungs, but also, and more importantly, in the brain. The beneficial effects of the hormone melatonin have been part of the health supplement scene for a time. For high melatonin production is known to be synonymous with a high immune system, low cancer risk, long life, energy, which is the most important on that list, stamina, and according to many, enhanced spiritual awareness. And this is why these two factors, energy and enhanced spiritual awareness, Freudian slip, is the two most important things that we are focusing on when it comes to this series of classes. Lawrence Gardner writes, high melatonin production thereby increases the facility, listen, for receiving and transmitting high frequency cosmic and local broadcast. In other words, it increases our ability to communicate with, back and forth, with the cosmic realm, with our higher consciousness. All right? With our higher consciousness, with our divine self. And it also leads to a greater state of cosmic awareness, a state of simply knowing. And this is the goal. This is our focus, our singular focus. In this regard, it is interesting to note that the pineal third eye has been found to contain very fine particles, rather like crystals in a wireless receiving set. Many magical rites and meditation techniques are aimed at gaining control of this organ and the fluid it produces, the live melatonin or the live melanin. Supplements brought over the counter are ineffective because, as Gardner explains, their inherent secretions are obtained from the desiccated or dead glands of dead animals, and they lack the truly important elements which only exist in live human glandular manufacture. So, we're going to move forward. The Vulcan, as the head and chief of the Cyclops, that is the kings of flame. Now we're getting into the energetic aspect of this and beginning to connect it to some of our very early ancestors. Nimrod, as the universal king, was the cuckold, king of the world. This was our original position here. As such, the emblem of his power was the bull's horns, hence the origin of the cuckold's horns. All right? And we're going to see that these things that were so positive, these symbols of the bull's horns and the one eye of the cyclops of the cuckold, which represented the pineal gland, were vilified, were denigrated. The cyclops was turned into some type of monster that ate humans. Nimrod was turned into the primordial representation of the devil. And then the representation of the devil with the horns on his head came into modern culture. However, Kuklops from kuk meaning king and lob meaning flame, the image of the great God was represented with three eyes. Also, in the Bible, the God is referred to as a consuming fire. As a consuming fire, the king of the flame. The image of the great God was represented with three eyes, one in the forehead. That is the third eye pineal that we've been focusing on. Hence the story of the Cyclops with the one eye in the forehead. A cuckold, sometimes shortened to cook or kook, is the husband of an adulterous wife. Very important. Very important. The husband of an adulterous wife. We want to talk about the divine feminine. We're going to find how these things were vilified. And the feminine aspect and the male aspect, which were one at one time, were made separate and were made very distinguishable, very separate concepts, those things that were one. In evolutionary biology, the term is also applied to males who are unwittingly investing parental effort and offspring, investing parental effort in offspring that are not genetically their own, Now, there is a scripture in the Song of Solomon that carries this idea of someone investing in something that is not their own. And this begins with the idea, which is always primal, of the divine feminine represented in the Song of Solomon. And it's the Song of Solomon, the first chapter, and verse 6. Listen very carefully. Look not upon me because I am black, because the sun have looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. In other words, investing what? Parental effort or care in offspring that are not genetically their own. The vineyard represents, I'll show you what it represents. The vineyard, when you look it up, is going to refer to the pineal we'll go right to that particular passage in Song of Solomon. When it talks about vineyards or vineyards, it is talking about the word kerem. Kerem. All right? And we're going to find out later that this is a term. See, every time they say from an unused root of uncertain meaning, that means they're trying to hide it from you. This term, the term vineyard, is a term that is referring to the genetic link or a familial link that is found in DNA that is traced from the woman, or inherited rather from the woman, and then traced back through the mitochondrial DNA. All right. So when it says males who were unwittingly investing parental effort in offspring, originally it was females. All right. They are put in charge of vineyards, but not their own. All we have to do is hearken back to the mammy image that was from the captivity period, the bondage period, where our ancestors, great, 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 great grandmothers, cared for other people's children, their vineyard, but not their own. Not their own. In Western traditions, cuckolds have been sometimes described as wearing the horns of the cuckold or wearing the horns. This is an allusion to the mating habits of stags and bucks who forfeit their mates when they are defeated by another male. So again, that is a reference to, on the male side, on the masculine side, of when we were conquered, when we were defeated in our own land, and we forfeited our wives, forfeited our women, forfeited our mates to what? The oppressors. The oppressors. This is a very important aspect. And our ancient ancestors were careful to write this into the record so that we can have a full understanding at this particular point. Many who hold occult and esoteric knowledge believe that the first two races of men, listen, were ethereal, phantom-like in their constitution and shape. What does that mean? It just means that the original inhabitants of this planet, our ancient ancestors, were more energetic or spiritual than they were physical in form. I'm going to say that again. This is a reference to our ancient ancestors, our most ancient ancestors. When they emanated into the physical plane or the earth realm, they were more like phantoms or ghosts. They were more energetic than they were physical in constitution and shape, in their appearance. It is said the first Atlanteans were like this also. Listen, neither male nor female, in other words, androgynous, interdimensional beings. Interdimensional beings. Now, this goes back to a very strong and healthy pineal gland in full operation, because it allowed them to be what? Multidimensional. And these aspects of DMT and melanin and serotonin excreted by the pineal gland, that it was very, very robust at that time. Very robust. And it gave us um, powers and abilities that did not need to be stimulated by meditation or uh, psychedelic drugs like LSD and psilocybin, or ayahuasca, that the Amazons use to provoke what? Out of body experiences. Out of body experiences, so that they can be multidimensional. All right. But it's said that trace amounts now of this DMT can be found in the lungs and also in the brain. So we were at a higher state of physical awareness at this particular time. These beings were, again, more ethereal, phantom-like, and less physical, more energetic, less physical, more androgynous. They were interdimensional. However, the more time they spent on Earth, the more dense and physical the bodies became, requiring food until eventually they became a physical form. So they became more, they became less reliant on energy from the cosmos, listen, and more reliant on energy from the solar system. Energy from the solar system that was what? Consumed physically through plants and animals. Consumed physically uh, from plants by consuming plants and animals. So the movement is back to that form, less physical, less physical. And this movement, family, because like causes produce like effects, this movement ultimately is not going to be achieved by what you eat and what you don't eat. Because as we listen and as we consider, eating was the cause of us becoming what? More dense, more physical, more human, and less divine. Now, I'm not saying that a proper diet is not important. It is, because we are in the world. We are in the world. But it is less important, far less important, than the type of light energy, listen, that we consume. The type of light energy that we consume, that we focus on. So this whole process takes place mentally first. It must begin mentally. The problem is that we have initiated the journey back by trying to do physical things, such as eating, which only which only puts our focus on something that is very physical and very human. You all got to be with me. So the journey back must be mental first. So whatever you eat, the focus, because 9 times out of 10, we're going to eat being here, the focus has to be the cosmic content of the food. from a mental aspect instead of the solar content of the food. We must, what it is called, spiritualize our existence or energize our existence. And that means focusing on the energetic quality, focusing our attention on the energetic quality. When we went over, I don't know if people remember, but we went over this portion before, which focused on cosmic and solar energy and the difference between each of these energies are drawn back into themselves, drawn back into the source. And we said that in the solar system, which is the simulated reality, the solar system is the simulated reality, that for every 1,000 units of sunlight that a plant can absorb, only 1%, 10 units of energy, is retained by the plant, while 990 or 99% is what? Returned back into the environment, returns back to the source. And the herbivore that comes along and eats the plant, which only retain the what? 10 units of energy, it only retains 1 unit. And the 99% is what? Returns back to the source. And for the carnivore that comes and eats the herbivore, the same ratio of energy exchange takes place, only retaining 1%, 99 going back into the environment and eventually and ultimately returning to the source. This is a futile and vain process, but this is what we signed on for when we became locked within the physical solar cycle, the material world. And as we eat, we perpetuate because we're only retaining a small percentage of an energy source. And most of that is used for maintaining what? The physical body. Most of that is used for maintaining the physical body.
Comment
Go ahead.
with the illustration that you showed
Uh-huh.
when the animal, the plant, the deer and the lion,
Uh-huh.
they're eating. They're getting more than humans would get if they cooked their food. So when you're eating from something that's raw, uncooked, then you're not killing. It's live, so it's going into the body in a live way. It's more energetic than dead.
Well, the whole point here, Nahay, we'll go back to it. We'll go back to it because here's the point that when we fell into further into the physical world, food was required to
Yes,
keep us running. So it that is what I'm saying, that eating, no matter what you eat, is not optimal. It's not optimal,
precisely.
listen, for returning us back to our source, back to our original divine source and form. We are we are essentially through eating trying to perfect imperfection, no matter what we eat. So the consumption of food is not the focus. It should not be the focus. Because
Understood. That's understood because that's part of being more carnal minded. Anything that is, of the world. Because a lot of times people think carnal mindedness just has to do with sexual energy, but it doesn't. It's just anything that is of the physical world. And even as it relates to sunlight, they want us to believe you should not look at the sun. But we get energy from the sun and we can get more energy from the sun if we know how to sun gaze.
right, but
That's just an
still,
example.
the solar system, this is the point that I'm making. The solar system is part of the simulated reality. It's not part of the organic reality. And even sunlight is beneficial, like food is beneficial for the same reason. But solar energy is in whatever form, in a direct form, in live food, in plant food, it is an inefficient system. It is a system of the material world, and it will not return us to the source. So we have to switch. Here's the whole point. We have to switch from solar energy and the solar system to the cosmic system and cosmic energy. That is the food of gods. We went over this before, but it bears repeating. Now I'll tell you what God, the Creator, eats. This solar system with solar energy in all of its various forms is inefficient. Again, it will never return us back to the non physical divine beings that we were. Physicality, humanity, is the trap that we fell into. And again, when we fell into it, it required that we began to eat. That this was the first war. The first war was the war on plants and animals. Animals, plants like animals are live. And eating a rabbit is just like eating a carrot because the carrot has to die and what? Forfeit its energy to you. The same as a rabbit has to die and forfeit its energy. We must begin to look at these things from an energetic standpoint. So, what we're stating is that the solar system and solar energy in all of its forms is an inefficient system. It is the physical system. And when you look at the rate of conversion, it tells you that you can only gain 1% at a time. The rest is what? Return to the source. 99% is return to the source. Keep that number in mind. 99%. Keep that in mind. The scriptures, Isaiah 40:31 says, "But they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." That condition, that ability cannot be attained through the physical, cannot be attained within the solar system, relying on that power. Why? Because energy transfer can be used to do work, such as what? Walking, flying, and running, right? So power is also the rate at which this work is performed. The same amount of work, listen, is done when carrying a load up a flight of stairs whether the person carrying it walks or runs, but more power is expended during the running because the work is done in a shorter amount of time. That is diametrically opposed as a rate, and it will not get you what we are talking about in Isaiah, what Isaiah 40 and 31 is talking about, where flying, running, and walking are what? The same thing. You must become a less physical being in order to perform that. A less physical being, less dense. And the less physical you become, the less you depend on solar energy and eating, and the more you transfer to another source of energy, which is cosmic energy, which is cosmic energy, which is the energy of the cosmos. So again, what does the creator eat? What does a God eat? In the Kabbalion, it tells us thusly, keep your mind ever on the star. That is a hint. Not on the sun, we're going to see, but a certain type of star. Not on the sun, but a certain type of star. We are all stars. We've heard our musicians, throughout the generations tell us through song, everyone is a star. You're a shining star. We are all made of star stuff, not earth stuff. Ultimately, we are ultimately made of star stuff. So, although we're not focusing on a particular star that is outside of us, remember, all this is mental and it's inside of us. But we're going to focus on what is called the cosmos. Again, we have this inside of us, but we're going to focus on the cosmos in order to figure this thing out. Keep your mind ever on the star, but listen, but let your eyes watch over your footsteps. So you're not looking at a star. What this is saying, you're not looking at a star up in the heavens or out there somewhere. You're focusing on yourself and your own footsteps. Why? Because you are the star. We got to get this. Lest you fall into the mire by reason of what? Your upward gaze. Your upward gaze. So the star that is being referred to here in the Kabbalion is you. And these energy centers that are within you is going to seem like I'm talking about something in outer space, out there in the universe somewhere, but I'm giving a disclaimer. All of this exists in you. There is no out there. There is no out there. There is no otherness to the multiverse. It is all within you. All right? The universe may have been born inside a black hole. When I talk about the black hole, I'm talking about you, talking about us. The black holes in our own cosmos, not talking about something outside of yourself, might be birthing new universes of their own. Now, again, they're talking about outer space. I'm not talking about outer space. I'm doing what my ancestors instructed me, keeping my gaze inward, not upward, watching my own footsteps and understanding that all of this star energy, cosmic energy exists in me from a mental aspect. So, bear with me. So, last time that we were on, we talked about this term seraph, all right, which is referring in the scriptures and translated as fiery serpent, all right. This is nothing, family, but Kundalini energy, all right. Kundalini energy, that energy that lies in some of us dormant in the base of the spine. Some of us have activated that. They've activated that. And the term seraph, again, refers to a serpent, but it also refers to a what they call a symbolical creature that is known for their what? Copper color. Copper color. And if we know anything about American history, we know that the indigenous Americans were described just like this, the copper colored natives, the copper colored natives, all right? But so a dual meaning, just like we have neuromelanin on the inside surrounding the critical inner organs. Melanin is on the outside of the skin. It has an outward what? Manifestation as well. All right? And it determines skin tone. So making this connection, in 1830, they had what was called the Indian Removal Act that forced Indians living east of the Mississippi River, these are indigenous Americans, our ancestors, living east of the Mississippi River from what? Their ancestral lands to uncharted territories west of the Mississippi. The migration became known as the Trail of Tears because many died along the way as they planned, and the rest suffered hardships trying to survive in a completely foreign land. Some fought to stay, but also suffered great hardships at the hands of the European oppressors. The term Indian now, this is going to be very important that we establish this, was given to the natives of America by Christopher Columbus because he originally thought he landed in the shores of East India. The people impacted by this law were the copper-colored race, or the Seraphim, all right? The serpent people, the fiery serpents, as they were called, of the people the Europeans found there, copper-colored, very important. So we see how they were represented. We see how they were represented physically. From South Carolina to Illinois to Mexico, Massachusetts, Peru, New York, copper-colored Ohio. In the early 1500s and 1600s, they called them Negroes. They officially designated them as Negroes, whether they were slaves or whether they were indentured servants. It just originally did not refer to slaves, and some were brought from Africa, but that's a whole nother story. These are the individuals that were captive in their own land. So let's deal with this a little before we move forward. Now, in terms of description, this thing was changed at a very critical time and specific time in history in terms of making different types of people. This is why sometimes mentally and to a great degree, even individuals that were born in America in our generations, we more strongly identify with Africans, melanated Africans, than we do what? Our own ancestors, in many cases, that were melanated indigenous people. This is very important, family, because remember, this is strongly mental in nature. The transition is going to be profoundly mental in nature. And any misinformation affects the power to transition. I'm going to say that again. Any misinformation and misapplication of information and knowledge profoundly affects our transition, our transformation, our evolution consciously. Illustration from Types of Man in 1854, whose authors, Josiah Clark Knott and George Robbins Glidden, implied, listen, that Negroes were a creational rank between Greeks and chimpanzees. It's very important. They did this for a reason. They did this for a reason. It was to separate us from a genuine idea of our ancestry, a genuine idea of our ancestry and thus our origins. And the origins that I'm talking about are the ones that we referred to when we talked about our ancient ancestors, what? Being more ethereal, more energetic, more phantom-like than physical. All right? And again, when we get caught in this trap of genealogy and physical inheritance, it's a distraction, and it has been a distraction for centuries in this country. A distraction away from what? Our energetic beginnings. That's what's important. So we want to connect with our true source. You know, even family, to say that I am Cherokee, or I found out, that feeds the ego for a while. All right? That is egocentric. To just what? Stay there. We want to forego completely the physical and connect to a genuine energetic source that is cosmic. At the same time, we realize that the shortest distance back to something is a straight line, but the lines have been blurred rather, and especially with this whole out of Africa scenario. So we want to straighten this out. Going back to Africa is just for some now, is going to be a straight route for some, but not all. We manifested here in the West. We emanated here in the West for a very important reason. Those of us that were born here, and that's most of us. Most of us. All right? So we're going to turn the clock back so that we can touch upon possibly an original historic base. The term 5 civilized tribes derives from the colonial and early federal period of the history of the United States. It refers to the 5 Native American nations: Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, or Muskogee, and Seminole. This Muskogee word is very important because it connects back, as we'll see in a later teaching, if we get to it, to the word Moshe or Moses, and it evolves or into the word Muskogee. It evolves into the word Michigan as well, but it refers to a language. Muskogee refers to a language that is very ancient. All right. These are the first 5 tribes that Anglo-European settlers generally consider to be what's called civilized. Now remember, they're later going to connect us. They're going to remove us from that aspect of civilization or a civilized human and connect us to a monkey. All right. Connect us to an ape, saying that we are what? A creational rank between Greeks and chimpanzees. Very important that we get this. We're not going to spend too much time on it, but it's good that we touch on this just a little bit. Understand what went on. So they originally thought, listen, that they were more civilized. Examples of colonial attributes adopted by these 5 tribes included, now this is a later time, Christianity. We'll explain why later. Centralized governments, literacy, market participation, written constitution, intermarriage with white Americans, and plantation slavery practices. The 5 civilized tribes tended to maintain stable political relations with the Europeans. So, these 5 civilized tribes were the ones that were targeted by the Europeans immediately for what? Assimilation. Assimilation. Not just mentally, family, but genetically. Genetically. Intermarriage with white Americans. And this began the lightening of the indigenous American. This was one step in the process. Now, underlying all of this, we're not talking about this from a merely political standpoint or cultural. We're dealing with the subject at hand, and that's melanin. And by expansion, the pineal gland, which produces melanin or melatonin. So this is how a step in the process that we were further removed from an energetic state, and how this pineal gland became further calcified. Intermarriage, crossbreeding, as we'll see. And then the mental aspect of a doctrine that it's by George Washington, promulgated a doctrine that held that Native Americans were equals. Now, this is the same political game that they're running. All men are created equal. Family, that is a lie. The people that wrote that know that that is not the truth. Now, again, this might sound political. It might even sound to some that have been brainwashed under this system, that have been indoctrinated under this system, like a false uh, notion called reverse racism. We're going to deal with that. All men are not created equal. All men are not created equal. The Europeans, Caucasians, the aberrant man is a created being. Our forefathers, our ancestors created him, created them. They know they are not equal. This is why they have to go through all. If they were superior, why go through all of this effort to oppress? All of this time and energy to oppress. So this doctrine of equality is not at all valid. So they promulgated a doctrine. Here is the slickness now, that American Indians were equals, but their society was inferior. This is a chess move. He formulated and implemented a policy rather, to encourage the civilizing process. We're going to stop here because that was not needed. All right. This was just incorporating them more into the simulated reality that has to do with what? The practice of owning private property, building homes, farming, educating the children, adopting a religion. They really don't care what religion you accept, as long as you accept a belief system. That is why America has what? Freedom of religion in the Constitution. And if they did this, that these Native Americans would what? Win acceptance from white Americans. Indoctrination, mental subjugation. All right. Again, they began this thing called scientific racism. All right. We're going to search it out. Both Ashley Montague and Ivan T. Sanderson have observed that Caucasoids, far from being the most refined race, are actually the most primitive appearing and least refined race. These are Caucasians saying it. Are you all with me? They're aware. Montague says if racists would take the trouble to visit their local zoo and for a moment drop their air of superiority and take a dispassionate look at one of the apes, they would find the hair of these creatures lank, that their lips are thin, that their bodies are covered with hair. In these characters, the white man stands nearer to the apes. These are Caucasians saying this. This is not Itai saying it. Itai is just repeating it and letting you know that they know. So they flip the script and brainwashing us to say, yeah, we're equals, but your society, your culture is inferior. And thus began the indoctrination process. Very important to understand as we trace the steps back to our source, to our energetic source. Sanderson says the Negro so-called race is apparent, and he says so-called race. This was again an invention. They know it. Is apparently, now he's saying something false. The newest and least, he's saying that they're the newest. We're not the newest. They're the newest. We are the oldest. But since this is being understood from the framework or spoken from the framework of evolutionary science, of course, they still retain in their minds that we are a new race. No, we know the further down they dig, the more that they test uh, these bones in whatever land they do the carbon testing, they reconstruct the bone. There's a black person, there's one of our ancestors. So, misstatement. But this is a true statement. We are the least pungent like of all, the least like a monkey of all. Apes have no lips and the straightest of hair, the shortest of legs, the longest of arms, and a host of other features that are the exact opposite of those of Negroes. The exact opposite. The most pungent like are the Caucasoids, which have non-everted lips, straight hair, and so forth. This is from the book The Iceman Inheritance, Prehistoric Sources of Western Man's Racism, Sexism, and Aggression. Racism, sexism, and aggression. These things are very important. They're going to be very important as we search these things out. Racism and aggression. The point is that melanated beings, are the most quote unquote civilized on the planet. But again, we we were bamboozled under duress to forego to first of all think of ourselves as equals to a people that brutally and barbarically stole our land, and then to accept their society, their structure as what? Superior to ours. Scientific racism, sometimes referred to as race realism or racial biology, is the pseudoscientific belief that empirical evidence exists to support or justify racism. This was the empirical evidence by looking at the skull phenotypes, all right, and comparing them, that they tried to pull this thing off that we uh, evolved from apes, that we were the missing link. This is a pseudoscientific belief that empirical evidence exists to support or justify racism, racial discrimination, racial inferiority, or racial superiority. Alternatively, it is the practice of classifying individuals of different phenotypes or genotype into discrete races. Historically, it received credence in the scientific community, but is now no longer considered scientific. Most of us learn scientific history based on this pseudoscience. A phenotype refers to the set of observable characteristics of an individual resulting from the interaction of its genotype with the environment. The genotype is the genetic makeup of an organism. The phenotype is how genetic and environmental influences come together to create an organism's physical appearance and behavior. Physical appearance and behavior. Scientific racism employs anthropology, notably physical anthropology, anthropometry, craniometry, that's what we saw above, looking at the skulls, and other disciplines or pseudo disciplines in proposing anthropological typologies, supporting the classification of human populations into physically discrete human races. Now, our ancestors never did anything like this, but they did it. So we're going to have to unravel this thing and take it back to what it was. Scientific racism was most common during the period of the 1600s to the end of World War I. Long period of time. Since the second half of the 20th century, scientific racism has been criticized. Yeah, criticized, but still taught, still promoted as obsolete and discredited. Yet, listen, historically has persistently been used to support or validate racist worldviews based upon the belief in the existence and significance of racial categories and a hierarchy of superior and inferior races. So now, again, here comes the okie doke. All right, here comes the okie doke. This is going to be the beginning of reverse racism. Benjamin Isaac, in The Invention of Racism in Classical Antiquity, 2006, reports that scientific racism is rooted in Greco-Roman antiquity. The prime example is the 5th century BC treatise Airs, Waters, Places by Hippocrates, about which the pseudo-Aristotle writes, the idea that dark people are cowards and light people courageous fighters is found already in Airs, Waters, and Places. Now here's the okie doke. Similarly, the ancient Indians considered all foreigners as barbarians. The 11th century Muslim scholar al-Biruni wrote that the Indians called foreigners impure. A few centuries later, Dubois observes that Hindus look upon Europeans as barbarians, totally ignorant of all principles of honor and good breeding. Well, in the eyes of the Hindu, a pariah outcast who is also a Hindu and a European are on the same level. The Chinese also viewed Europeans as repulsive, ghost-like creatures, and even devils. Historically, they had good reason. The Chinese writers also referred to Europeans as barbarians. Well, if you look at the word barbarians, that was true. Barbarians has to do. See, in the first part of the article, what we talked about before, their characteristics is more ape-like because they are covered with hair. Well, what do you think the word barbarian means? It means you need a barber for your whole body. That was the term, what barbarians meant. So, family, we know that melanin causes a person to be more what we refer to as civilized. All right? But remember, this game is chess, not checkers. And so when they talk about scientific racism, they include the historic observations of people that what? Interacted with the European and found them, according to their own records, as individuals that had hair all over their body, not just hair all over their body, lice and other parasites, bed bugs. This is historic information. Did not wash, did not bathe, didn't change their clothes, didn't wash their clothes. So they want to turn those accurate historic observations into what? Scientific racism. Now, how is that scientific racism? That's what we were talking about. That's just observations of one culture observing another. So I have white people shedding tears because that's a part of their history. It's a part of their origin. But we have some people, black people, that shed tears on behalf of white people shedding tears. Why? Because they've been indoctrinated to what? Think, hey, well, everybody is equal. That is not the case. I'm going to emphatically state that again for the record. It is not the case. It is not accurate historically at all. And in fact, not accurate. Not reverse racism. It's a statement of a fact. And their behavior throughout history proves this. It bears it out. It confirms it. So this next portion has to be about reverse racism exposed. Listen, reverse racism refers to perceived prejudice. Well, what do I mean perceived prejudice? That these we didn't come up with this term reverse racism. They did. So that they perceive that there's some sort of prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism on the basis of race directed against a member of what? A dominant or privileged racial group. No, maybe it's that some people are just fed up with you dominating them and oppressing them and having the benefit of all of the privileges. Oh, by the way, in our own land. Now, the origin is the 1950s. This originated in 1950. Very important. Earliest use was found in the Washington Post. Empirical studies have found little evidence for the existence of what? Reverse racism. Now we can find easily instances of racism, but empirical studies have found little evidence of what? This hoax called reverse racism. But many of us, when I speak on this, all people are not created equal. It goes against how we've been programmed, how we've been indoctrinated. And I showed you the historical context of that. Racial and ethnic minorities in the United States generally lack the power to damage the interests of whites, who remain the dominant group. Claims of reverse racism tend to ignore such disparities in the exercise of power and authority, which scholars argue constitute an essential component of racism. Point blank, period. Now, family, this is what I wanted to get to. Examples of reverse racism: melanin theory. They call it a theory. After everything that we've talked about on this call, during this series, and on this particular class, that scientifically prove the physical, spiritual, energetic effects of melanin, they categorize it under reverse racism. Here we go. Melanin theory is a claim in Afrocentrism that a higher level of melanin, the primary determinant of skin color in humans, is the cause of an intellectual and physical superiority of dark-skinned people, and provides them with natural and supernatural powers. Well, if that is the case, then I am a racist, because science, not modern science and ancient science, prove this. And we are proving this in fact. In fact, it is considered a racist and pseudoscientific theory. According to Bernard Ortiz de Montellano, of Wayne State University, quote, the alleged properties of melanin, mostly unsupported, false, irrelevant, false, or distortions of the scientific literature, false again, are used to justify Afrocentric assertions. One of the most common is that humans evolved as blacks in Africa. Now, we're not claiming that we evolved at all. Again, this is from the purview or the vantage point of the privileged society that invented human evolution. We're saying that we emanated into the physical realms, not evolved. That is your invention. That is their invention. Humans evolved as blacks in Africa, and that whites are mutants, albinos, or melanin recessive. Fact, provable by modern science and by ancient science, mythology, and assertions. The melanin hypothesis was supported by Leonard Jeffries, who, according to Time magazine, believes that melanin, the dark skin pigment, gives blacks intellectual and physical superiority over whites. Now, this guy Ortiz de Montellano, Bernard Ortiz de Montellano, wrote an article or has a work called Magic Melanin, Spreading Scientific Illiteracy Among Minorities. They do not want us to study this. They do not want us to know this. And most importantly, they don't want us to apply it. And they've gone through tremendous lengths that we've covered from the beginning of this class till now, over hundreds and thousands of years, to keep us away from the knowledge that we are now ingesting, digesting, and then applying. So with that, we're halfway through here. We're going to take a break for about 5-10 minutes, and we're going to come back and do the close. All right? Any questions or comments at this time, you can ask them now. So, the effort we see is evident to keep us away from further exploring this melanin, this divine power that is in and on all of us. And they are attempting to now use this false claim of reverse racism, this vilifying of the melanin theory and other methods, calling it pseudoscience and that sort of thing, in an effort to keep an oppressed people from reconnecting to their divine source of power. We want to take a look at the overall blueprint for doing this. And the blueprint, quite simply, is to crossbreed. This is what they did, crossbreed, and they call it intermarriage, but crossbreed to create a multiplicity of diverse phenotypes within the captive community, then demonize, emphasize, and exploit those differences. And you can look in the Bible, Genesis, the 6th chapter, 1 and 2, talks about this in an allegory. Remember, a phenotype is the set of observable characteristics of an individual resulting from the interaction of its genotype with the environment. And that's a nice way of saying the environment was what? Foreigners colonizing our environment. And what? Encouraging intermarriage or interbreeding or crossbreeding. The Willie Lynch letter talks about this blueprint. Quote, crossbreeding completed. Further severance from what? Their original beginning. Family, this is their focus. This is their goal to what? Sever or cut us off from our original beginning, which was not evolution, which was not being created at any point, but emanating from our divine singularity into the diversity of the physical realms. Point blank, period. And they use crossbreeding because they know that the straightest line, again, like I stated before, back to our original source is through our ancestors. It's through our DNA. That is the surest source. And they understood this. So again, crossbreeding completed. For further severance from their original beginning, we must completely annihilate the mother tongue of both the new nigger and the new mule and institute a new language that involves the new life's work of both. So this goes back to the societal and cultural changeover and obliteration. This is why I said that, and they focused on these, 5 civilized tribes. And I said that the original language, the language, Muskogee, or the name Muskogee, is connected to an original primal language. So cut them off, civilize them, so to speak, cut them off from their language, their original source, and then dilute the gene pool, all right, to what? Cut us off from an original beginning. And then through education, through compulsory education, during and after the captivity, slowly introduce this out of Africa scenario. On the top of the list is age. Again, creating, exploiting, demonizing these differences. So the first war family was the war against the plants and animals. The second war was the war of the genders, the war against the divine feminine. The third war, war against the ages, or the creation of what? A generation gap to further sever communication with individuals that had a deeper history, a knowledge of the history. At the top of the list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. I don't believe that. The second is color. Again, after the crossbreeding, make individuals color conscious, light skin, dark skin, whatever shade they are. And, to this day, many of those in our generation have that color struck type attitude. There is intelligence, size, sex, sizes of plantations, status on plantations, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, on a hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, have coarse hair, or is tall or short. That you must understand that these are all phenotypes, and have nothing to do with the original origin. Quite on the contrary, are being used to what? Obfuscate and confuse the original origin. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slaves, listen, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. We see evidence of that on Facebook every day. Evidence of this indoctrination on Facebook and other social media every day, and through simple interaction with our people past the conversational level. So this thing was carried further uh, during the mid 17th century, mid 18th century, 19th century, by an individual called Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, who was the father of physical anthropology. Now remember and recall that scientific racism had its inception through something called what? Physical anthropology. And that was pioneered by this individual, John Friedrich Blumenbach. I won't get too much into his history. He doesn't deserve it, but he was the one that laid the foundation for the creation of race, which is an idea that the human species is divided into distinct subgroups on the basis of inherited physical and behavioral differences. Now, let's understand this, that one of their key strategies was crossbreeding, right? So how are you going to get an accurate reading of inherited physical and behavioral differences if this crossbreeding was done, and behavioral if we traded in our society and culture for a foreign society and culture? Bears some meditation and consideration. So we understand that this that these strategies, that these different aspects of the blueprint were designed to what? Cut us off from our original beginnings. Scholars now argue that races are cultural inventions reflecting specific attitudes and beliefs that are imposed or were imposed on different populations in the wake of Western European conquest beginning in the 15th century. So we see quite clearly that this has been going on for hundreds of years. The modern meaning of the term race, with reference to humans, began to emerge in the 17th century. Very, very critical time period between the 1500s and the 1800s. Now, just to show you that this is still something that bears our attention and focus, I'm going to show you an article from July of 2012 titled Personality and Individual Differences, Volume 53, Issue 1, again, July 2012, pages 4 through 8. And I'm not going to get into the article, but I'll just give you the review and the abstract. The review: do pigmentation and melanocortin and the melanocortin system modulate aggression, listen, and sexuality in humans as they do other animals? If you think these racists still are not promulgating this thing that was started in the 1500s, this is 2012. The question: do pigmentation and the melanocortin system modulate aggression and sexuality in humans as they do other animals? Now, that's a fair question, all right? But I want to read the abstract. This is by J. Philippe Rushton and Donald I. Temple. The abstract: pigmentation of the hair, skin, cuticle, feather, and eye is one of the most salient and variable attributes of vertebrates. In many species, melanin-based coloration is found to be pleiotropically linked to behavior. We review animal studies that have found darker pigmented individuals average higher amount of aggression and sexual activity than the lighter pigmented individuals. Now, tell me, how is that different than linking Negroes to chimpanzees and other animals? And this was from 1854. These ideas still exist, family. And as the research into the power of melanin and its links to the divine, to divinity, to those superhuman ancestors that first manifested, as they make that link, they are going to use tried and true propaganda to try to assert age-old racist attitudes. We review animal studies that have found darker pigmented individuals, Negroes in other words, average higher amounts of aggression and sexual activity than lighter pigmented individuals. This is actually diabolical here. We hypothesize that similar relationships between pigmentation, aggression, and sexuality occur in humans. We first review the literature on non-human animals, such as chimpanzees, and then review some of the correlates of melanin in people, including aggression and sexual activity, both within human populations, example, siblings, and between populations, that is, races, nations, states. Studies find that darker pigmented people average higher levels of aggression and sexual activity. Not to mention that as we've done the study, family, how did they take the Americas other than aggression? And then the civilization process had to do with what? Intermarriage or crossbreeding. The melanated people weren't doing that. It was the non-melanated people that are on record as demonstrating that type of animalistic behavior. But then they want to say, we are equals. We are not equals. No matter how you look at it, we are not equals. So again, 2012 article making the same assertions of that were made centuries ago. The studies find that darker pigmented people average higher levels of aggression and sexuality and also lower IQ. Returning back to the bell curve, people, we conceptualize skin color as a multi-generational adaptation to differences in climate over the last 70,000 years. Well, what about this crossbreeding? What about this intermarriage and intermixing? You think that might have something to do with it, but that is not a factor that they are considering in this study. This is straight racist pseudoscience. Multi-generational adaptations, differences in climate over the last 70,000 years as a result of cold winters theories, and what? The out of Africa model of human origins. This is what you're buying into with this out of Africa thing. We propose life history theory. We propose life history theory to explain the covariation found between human and non-human pigmentation and variables such as birth rate, infant mortality, longevity rate, HIV/AIDS, and violent crime. Same old stuff, family. Same old stuff. 2012. So, looking at this, tracing the way back to the original, we have to navigate through a minefield. And what I'm saying is that the straightest and the most narrow path back is, first of all, through the ancestors. But we have to identify where our ancestors originate to what? Start the movement backward. If we're talking about out of Africa, and the fact is that your ancestors should be traced back through the Americas, then you've already created a false step to start out. And again, this is what was promoted. This is what was promoted. We have to, the way that we link with our ancestors is energetically and mentally. That's where they exist. Are you all with me? And again, the waters, the lines back, they've been blurred, they've been muddied, they've been obscured by this false indoctrination. By this false indoctrination. So moving forward, see, these are things generally when we get onto these subjects, a lot of people don't consider. They just assume that what is out there, well, is correct without researching it. And the vast majority of us have bought into this out of Africa deal, this out of Africa thing. And again, a certain part of the population, that might be true. That might be true. But I'll dare say that the most significant members of the population in the West, in the Americas, have their ancestral beginnings right here and not Africa. So, what we're going to begin to do is trace this backwards as we look at this in relation to the end time events. But it's important, again, that we straighten this out. We can go to the symbols again and trace the symbols back to our origin. These things, although they appropriate the symbols correspond to energetic signatures that are within all of us. That are within all of us. They are universal in that sense. And they can activate these energies that will motivate us into the proper areas. This is the only reason I can teach this at this time, because I was the one of the ones that bought, wholesale, hook, line, and sinker, the out of Africa thing, and it was only until recently, that I began to reconnect to what? An original historic base. And then the whole thing starts to unravel. It starts to unravel like the skin on an onion. And you get back to that core bit of knowledge. This is what is happening. This is our way back. We are tapping into our power, but we must touch an original historic source in order to find our way back. All right? In order to find our way back. What we said last time, that we are connecting you all, what we're learning here, the knowledge here, it is corresponding to the daily sessions that we do. Some of the people that are on this call, a few, are on the daily sessions as well. And I think it's critical because of the prophetic time period that we are in, like I said last time, that we stay pretty current in terms of the information. We covered the information that we covered tonight. We covered to a certain extent on the daily calls last week. There was information that you all got tonight that was not, as a matter of fact, the vast majority of the information that you got was not covered on that call. Primarily because we were interrupted with a revelation that I had to share during that time that I will share with you within the next 2 classes. We are at week 12 tonight. So the final classes, the final 2 classes, will be next week and the week afterwards. Now, just because the classes are ending, our formal classes are ending, does not mean, of course, that we will not be sharing the information on the weekly class. All of you all uh, that are on this class get everything that we share and that we present on the weekly class. Is it anyone that is not getting those classes? They're on YouTube. Is there anyone not getting those classes?
Yep.
Everyone's getting them, huh?
Yep.
Okay, very good.
No. So no, I'm not. So how do you tap into it?
You just go to YouTube to my channel. All the information is on there. Uh, hey, do you have a different email address than the one that you gave me last year?
I have the same one.
Okay, so I believe I'm sending that to you. Hold on.
I've been going online. I mean, I just didn't know that that was the actual classes, but I had been getting things on YouTube, as well as something I got from oh gosh, I'm sorry, I can't recall the site, but it was through Google Docs. And I just found it today.
Oh yeah, that's not me. I'm coming straight from. I'm just emailing it to you, whatever your email address is, and
Oh, okay,
that should be just about every day or every other day that you get that.
okay.
So again, we'll be providing that information is critical. What we're going to do uh, is next week we're going to start here and present you with the information that we've shared, the recent revelatory knowledge that we shared that is very important. Again, that has to do with the divine and expansion on the divine feminine. All right. Does anyone remember Ankh Afnakansu? We introduced that character a couple of classes ago. Everyone should remember that, correct?
I remember that.
Correct.
I
Okay.
Yeah.
remember that.
So we got further information and decoded that. And like I said again, the next 2 classes we're going to go very intensely into that information because family, this is going to give us the blueprint. It's going to give us very specific way, and I'll be sharing that with you of how to uh, activate this power, and it's going to give us a very clear picture of exactly where it's coming from. Uh, and again, internally, we're going to look at the hieroglyphs, and we've been given a source where they've decoded the hieroglyphs in terms of this energetic process. And it's very simple. It's very simple. Everyone can do it. Uh, I'm encouraged that everyone will do it. But again, we're going to cover this next week. I'm going to send you all in advance the notes and as well as the classes that we did on the weekly class. All right, along with the notes and the recording of this class.
Thank you so much.
No
I
problem.
have. Hi, everybody.
All
This is
right,
Inray.
how you doing?
Hi, great. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. So, I, how do we get to the live sessions? In other words, if you do them live in the morning, if we want to be on live, how do we do that?
I'll send you the link along with the notes. I'll send you the link
Uh-huh.
to the daily class. And you know, if you're
Okay.
available, not a lot of people are available during that time, but we get on
Right.
around 10 o'clock, somewhere around
Uh,
that time, a little bit later. But we get on, but it's daily. All right.
yeah.
And I'll
Okay.
make sure.
So sometimes I may, and sometimes I may not be, but that'd be great. I like to
No
have
problem.
that option.
I'll send everyone
Thank
the
you.
link. I'll send everyone the link along with the notes, and everyone's welcome. You know, if you can participate. All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So
All right.
we're gonna close it down here. And again, we're going to begin with this new revelatory knowledge on next week and close it out the week after. It's going to be very intense. All right.
Okay. Looking forward.
All right. So, wholeness to everyone. I thank you for your attendance and your attention. And we'll be getting the film out to this uh, ASAP sometime tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you. Wholeness to everyone. Wholeness to you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
fam.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to
All
stop
right.
here.